Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a legal saga that went on for more than 20 years. It involves millions of dollars in what you could call phantom debt, and it was all decided by one absolutely brilliant legal argument. This is a story about how the law can, believe it or not, actually bend time.
So, just imagine this for a second. A government agency is trying to collect a huge unpaid tax bill. The guy who owed the money, he died years ago. And there is a 15-year legal clock, a deadline that's about to run out. They sue just in the nick of time. But what if a court turns around and says, sorry, your lawsuit didn't actually stop the clock? Well, that's the exact high-stakes problem at the very heart of this story.
And let me tell you, this case was an absolute marathon. It all kicks off way back in 2002 with the death of a businessman. Fast forward 15 years to 2017, and the Tax Bureau scrambles to file a lawsuit. But the real fireworks start in 2023. The Supreme Court, basically facing a legal brick wall, comes up with a whole new way of thinking about time, which then sets the stage for the final verdict that finally ended this 22-year-long saga.
Okay, so let's set the scene for this whole financial mystery. It all begins with a dead businessman and a massive fortune that was hidden in plain sight.
Right, so here are our key players, kind of like the cast of characters. First, you've got Cho Feng-lin, the man who died back in 2002, owing the government a lot of money. The creditor, the one trying to get the money back, is the Kaohsiung National Tax Bureau. They're chasing over 31 million new Taiwan dollars. That's roughly $1 million US. And then we have the defendants, 4 of Cho's family members and business associates, the people whose bank accounts the money was actually in. And here is the central puzzle of the whole case. The Tax Bureau found the money, sure, but it wasn't in any accounts with Cho Feng-lin's name on them. It was sitting in accounts that legally belonged to those 4 defendants. So you can see the problem, right? How in the world can the government seize money that, on paper, belongs to somebody else? Well, the answer comes down to this really important legal idea, the borrowed name account. Basically, it's an arrangement where the real owner of the money, in this case Cho Feng-lin, used the names of his family and friends to open bank accounts. So he was the one controlling all the money, but their names were on the paperwork. The Tax Bureau's whole argument was that this was really his money, and when he died, it became part of his estate and could be used to pay his tax debt. As you can probably guess, trying to prove this in court was not easy. The case got stuck for years on a kind of legal seesaw, with different courts going back and forth, unable to agree on who was right. And to give you an idea of just how messy this was, just look at the rulings for one single defendant, Lin Chi-kuo. In 2019, the district court says, nope, not enough proof, and he wins. But then in 2021, the high court flips it completely, saying he was unjustly enriched. Basically, he got money he shouldn't have. So now the Tax Bureau wins. The courts couldn't even agree on the basic facts of the case. So this cycle of wins, losses, appeals, and do-overs just went on and on for years. The case kept getting bounced from higher courts back down to lower courts to be looked at all over again. But all this time, a much, much bigger problem was hiding in the background, one that was about to blow up the entire case. Now let's talk about the main villain of our story, a ticking clock that nearly killed the whole case for good. I'm talking about the statute of limitations. So here's how the law works. A claim like this has a 15-year time limit. After that, you're out of luck. Cho Feng-lin died in December 2002. That meant his estate's right to go after the money in those borrowed name accounts would be gone forever in December 2017. The Tax Bureau managed to file its lawsuit in August 2017, seemingly just under the wire. But then, a bombshell ruling from the Supreme Court. The court basically said, hold on, the Tax Bureau sued for itself as a creditor. It did not sue on behalf of the dead man's estate. And legally, only a lawsuit from the estate could actually get that money back. So the devastating conclusion was that while the Tax Bureau's lawsuit was on time, the estate's 15-year clock had never actually been stopped. It had run out. The result was immediate, and for the Tax Bureau, it was catastrophic. In March of 2023, the High Court just followed the Supreme Court's logic and ruled that, yep, the 15-year deadline had expired way back in 2017,
The defendants won, the tax bureau was about to get absolutely nothing.
So after 2 decades of fighting tooth and nail in court, was this really it? Was the entire case over, just defeated by a legal technicality? I mean, it sure looked that way. But then, just when all hope seemed lost, in its very next ruling on this same case, the Supreme Court did something, well, something extraordinary. It basically looked at the dead end its own logic had created and invented a grand new legal theory that changed everything. The court essentially hit a giant pause button. It asked this simple but totally revolutionary question. What if we've been looking at this whole thing wrong? What if the problem wasn't that the clock ran out? What if the clock had been legally frozen in time all along? And this new theory was called legal impediment. Honestly, the court's reasoning was genius. Here's how it worked. They argued that back in 2017, when the tax bureau got its own order to collect the money, it accidentally created a roadblock. The estate couldn't sue anymore because the tax bureau was already trying to get the money. So the court said this roadblock was a legal impediment. And here's the brilliant part. It paused the estate's 15-year clock. The clock would stay frozen until that roadblock was gone. And when it was, the law gives you a fresh 1-month grace period to make your move. And this is the key line from that incredible 2023 ruling. It's basically saying that if some legal obstacle gets in your way and stops you from suing, and that obstacle is still there when the deadline hits, the law cuts you some slack. It gives you a whole extra month to act after the obstacle is finally gone. This clever interpretation was the lifeline the tax bureau so desperately needed. So, armed with this powerful new paused clock theory, the whole case went back to the High Court one last time for a final, decisive verdict. And the impact was just staggering. You look at the situation before this new theory. The defendants owed zero because the deadline was supposedly expired. But after this theory was applied, the final ruling completely flipped the script. They were now on the hook for nearly 30 million new Taiwan dollars. And here is the final scorecard. The High Court, using the Supreme Court's paused clock logic, decided that the deadline had not expired after all. It ordered the 4 defendants to pay back every dollar that had been traced to their accounts. And just like that, this epic 22-year legal battle was finally over. So what's the big takeaway from all this? I think it's that a legal deadline, even something that sounds as final as a statute of limitations, isn't always the end of the line. Under just the right circumstances, and with a really creative legal argument, you can actually pause the clock. And it really leaves you with a fascinating question to think about. This entire 20-year, multi-million-dollar case completely turned on one single, brilliant interpretation of the law. It just makes you wonder, how many other legal battles out there are just one clever argument away from a completely different ending?